The 6.5 is on the road here in Las Vegas at AWS reInvent 2024. It should be no surprise that with most of the announcements are about AI, specifically generative AI. Daniel, great event so far.
It's great to be here. And we've heard a lot about moving the needle and that the needle was going to be moved. And so far what I'm seeing is a lot of focus on AI, but not just on AI as a whole. I think we're kind of turning the corner, Pat, from this kind of Rev 1, Gen 1 that started a couple years ago. And now we're really into this finding value from AI. And that's really the feeling I've gotten so far during our time here at reInvent.
For sure. And listen, the tech is cool. We love tech, new tech, but the reality is for enterprises and businesses to adopt this, you need to have the right tools. They need to be simple. I mean, nothing is simple in tech, but as simple as they possibly can be. And there were some investments done in the, that old AI, the machine learning stuff that needs to be capitalized and used as well. And I can't think of a better person to have this discussion. Bhaskar, welcome to the 6.5.
Thank you.
First time guest, this is wonderful.
Absolutely, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, congratulations on all the announcements.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a great, absolutely a great set of few days. It's probably one of the most exciting set of launches we have actually done on GenAI and data and ML and how we are bringing all of them together. So I'm super excited to be talking about those with you folks.
Yeah, it was a really exciting run up. There was a lot of kind of press, a lot of speculation, what's going to happen. You're the largest infrastructure provider in the world. And of course, one of the most exciting companies that really fundamentally changed computing and basically enterprise access to the cloud. And so, now there's so much focus. You kind of heard us in the run up, Bhaskar, but there's so much run up as to how do we get value? How do we start to put some, we're beyond the whole just CapEx spending and standing up GPUs. And now people are starting to talk about, okay, we've got all this data. We have, these AI tools that we've picked and we're investing in. We have stuff that's openly available. We have stuff that's proprietary. You're seeing this kind of handoff, data, AI, tools. What are some of your, recommendations to your large set of customers about how to kind of make this handoff and streamline for efficiency and to really move AI projects forward?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a perfect, tee up. This is one of the reasons why we actually launched the next generation of SageMaker. We have been hearing from our customers how difficult it is, like you rightly mentioned, to actually get value out of disparate set of data sources that they have. You spoke about how customers are generating their own ML models there, now they are wondering how to actually link them all both to get to a GenAI app development. So this whole process from moving from data to analytics to ML to GenAI has actually been like a very siloed and disparate set of experience for the customers. And we have been hearing this from our customers in terms of how we can actually bring them all together. And that actually led us to the announcement of the next generation of SageMaker, where we provide a seamless way to move from a disparate set of data sources and being able to do data processing on them, being able to actually take the data that is actually in Redshift or in S3 or in a federated data sources and being able to do SQL analytics on it, and then connect them all to your ML model development, and then actually build a GenAI app on top. So being able to move from data to analytics to ML to AI, we have made it super easy with the launch of the next generation of SageMaker. Now, all of this is probably not that useful if you don't have the right security built in. So one of the things that we focused on is how do you actually ensure there is uniform governance, uniform way to regulate access to the data, access to the models, and then being able to tie them to the entire development lifecycle from data to ML to AI.
No, it's good stuff, and I'm glad you're hitting on data. I mean, 2 years ago, before it was cool, and people started talking about what you could do with generative AI and LLMs and the ability to take data sources that were typically disparate, right? Your CRM, your ERP, your PLM, all these fancy acronyms for enterprise apps, and that changes the game as well. And I'm sure, as you've seen, and I'm pretty sure I've heard you talk about, is the requirements of moving from, I'll call it science project to POC to scale for the generative AI scaffolding and tools and database and data management. It changes. Is that correct? Can you talk me through that? How has it changed? How have your customers expressed the need for a different type of capability once they're scaling?
That's a great question. I think if I look at the vantage point, the last 18, 24 months, I think, have predominantly been about how do I actually try a bunch of prototypes for GenAI to get value, right? So it's been an unprecedented way of exploration of prototypes. Now you need to be able to move from, and that's what I called as Act 1. How do you move from Act 1 to Act 2, where you're now taking some of these prototypes and putting them into production, but now you want to be able to do this in a more secure, scalable, trustworthy manner, and you need to be able to build a viable business that's actually scalable. How do you do that, right? And this is where I think our announcements for the next generation of SageMaker is actually extremely compelling. So if you take data processing, we have Amazon's Athena, we have Amazon Glue, we have Amazon's EMR, we have Amazon's managed workflow for Apache Airflow. All of that helps you prepare your data and use the data for orchestrating and building your GenAI applications. Now, if you move to SQL analytics, we have integrated Redshift with SageMaker Lakehouse. And so now the data that resides in Redshift or the data that actually resides in S3 or in federated data sources, like you said, in ERP and other places, you can now bring them all together and have a single way to govern and single way to look at lineage across all of these, and then do SQL analytics on top, right? Now, all of this is useful only if 4 conditions I think are true. One, I think, is data quality. Garbage in, garbage out.
Sure, it's been that way for
a long time. Forever, right? And that's true in GenAI too.
Amplified in GenAI.
Absolutely amplified in GenAI, because you want to be able to provide fresh contextual data. So data quality. Second is, when I spoke about prototyping, customers were mostly in silos. So when you're in silos, you can use siloed data sources and you can create your own prototypes. But now when you want to go into production, you have to find a way to unify all of these data sources together and find a single way to govern these data sources for your GenAI application. How do you do that? So data governance is the second piece. The third piece is security. You want to be able to have the right level of security across this diverse set of data sources and integrate them into your development lifecycle, right? The fourth one, I think you touched upon it, which is, how do you provide the right infrastructure and tooling to be able to do this at scale? And this is one of the things that AWS absolutely excels in, which is providing all of these sources of tools that can actually help you scale with the various data sources that you have underneath the covers.
It's interesting. We've all, I think, at some point in this brief conversation, referenced the 2 years, and of course, we all, since ChatGPT, that was like this weird inflection that sits on a continuum of AI. And of course, people like you that have been around SageMaker for a while know that ML has been a much bigger part for enterprises for a long time. And of course, you've used this stat, 40, 50 years since the earliest algorithm. So AI is not new. And I think everybody out there kind of needs that reminder at times. But what we are seeing now is kind of customers, we've talked, you said Act 2, so you're a theater guy. You appreciate the theater. But what we are seeing is expectations change. 2 years ago, it was getting on earnings calls and everybody seeing how many times they could say AI. And you got value in your stock for that. Now I think there's a new level of accountability being held. And that new level of accountability is, how are you deriving value and actually being able to express that through customer experience, employee retention, product development, and innovation. So your customers' expectations from 2 years ago when you started Bedrock, next generation, they're evolving. Can you talk a little bit about that evolution, what they're seeing, what they're asking for, what they're expecting, to be able to really meet that kind of Act 2 that you just...
Absolutely. I think, the Act 2, which is essentially how do I take some of these prototypes and put them into production, requires customers to look more critically in terms of how do we actually make it cost effective for not just training purpose, but for also inference purpose, right? So one of the key things that we look at when we actually look at what needs to get into production, I would say there are probably 4 key drivers. First, I think, is cost. How do you actually control the training cost? How do you control the inference cost? And we announced a bunch of new features in the last few days, which spoke about how do you actually reduce the training costs. So Amazon SageMaker, for example, we actually said, hey, we have a way for you to reduce the training costs because we can now create flexible training plans for you. We can actually govern the tasks for you automatically, and we can better use the compute resources that are actually underneath the covers. How do you make them more efficient? So these actually reduce the cost for training. Now, you've created a model, or you've basically chosen one of the models that are publicly available. How do you now reduce the inference cost at runtime, right? That becomes another important issue when customers go into what I call as Act 2. And here, model distillation, that we announced recently, is an extremely capable way by which you can take a publicly available model, foundation model, and then make this big model, which is a teacher model, teach a smaller model that is actually more cost efficient. That takes care of cost. Now, you have to come to model choices. Now, models are available to everybody, right? Foundation models are available to everybody. So what is the differentiator when you actually want to move from prototype to production? The data becomes your differentiator, to your point, right? The data sources that you have becomes a differentiator. And how do you take the data and unify that with the model so that your GenAI application is not a generic GenAI application, but it's actually something that reflects your company's culture, your company's values, and your company's documents. So the releases that we did on Bedrock Knowledge Bases, the graph frags, they actually help you take data that's specific to your organization and actually combine it with the models. And the last one, I think, is trust, right? How do you actually go build trusted GenAI applications? And how do you instill that trust not just in the application, but also in the users of the application? And we announced that Amazon is the first public company, cloud company, which is ISO 42001 certified. And this certification essentially is a public certification that allows Amazon and the scrutiny of how we actually develop these AI systems and what that actually means for instilling trust in our customers.
Wow, a lot going on here.
Lots going on
Bhaskar,
here.
I'm a recovering product person, industry guy. So I used to do that, and now I just, I run an analyst company but I get to go to all the announcements. So it's like heaven for me. This is great. And one thing that I really appreciate about AWS is you're a product company, and go through here's the customer problem. Here's the pain points it's causing. Here is what we're bringing to market. Here's the solution. Here's how it works. And here's the benefit. I love that, by the way. But I have to ask you. You did hundreds of announcements here. I'm going to have to ask you, which one of your generative AI product children do you gets you most excited?
Fantastic. You're asking me to choose between which of my
I mean,
eyes are
I love all my kids the same.
I know it's tough, but the problem is
Me too.
You can't list 100, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna limit you here. What are your favorite, or the ones that get you most excited?
Yeah, so maybe I should, let me walk you through what I think are the logical layers of how customers would interact with AWS services than the ones we announced. At the outset, as I mentioned, I'm really excited about the unified SageMaker, the next generation of SageMaker that we announced, because this now truly addresses a key customer ask, which is, please help us move from data to analytics to ML to AI in a more seamless and integrated manner. And I'm super excited about that announcement. Second, I think, is if you come to Amazon Bedrock, we spoke about how cost is very critical for inference. So we announced model distillation. And here you can take a teacher model and you can use that to teach a smaller model. And in fact, models that are distilled using Bedrock are a whopping 500% faster, right? And they cost you 75% cheaper to run. That's pretty significant when you're looking at running inference at scale. Second, if you look at the work that we did on multi-agent collaboration. Now, one of the things that I think was a transition point between companies moving from prototype to production is the realization that one model is not going to rule them all. So how do you build these siloed interfaces where an agent is actually good at one specific task You now create a bunch of these agents, and now you want to have a leader agent kind of, which will coordinate across these agents to produce the right response to the customer. So we introduced multi-agent collaboration, which allows companies to be able to build these agents and deploy them into production and collaborate across these agents to produce a single unified response. On Amazon Bedrock, we introduced the Bedrock Marketplace, which provides more than 100 plus models that are available. These are diverse models, so customers can pick and choose which model they want for their particular use case. And finally on Bedrock, again, I didn't want to list the entire list, but if I have to choose my top, few children that I love.
Many children, he loves them
exactly,
all.
Yeah. The Bedrock automation, data automation, this is very critical. We were speaking about this earlier. Companies have a diverse set of unstructured data. Some of them are PDFs, they're images, audio, right, and video. So how do you take this large collection of diverse unstructured data, very easily transform it using a single unified API so that you can now create value and insights from this data? So the Bedrock data automation is something I'm very excited about because it brings in this capability that at scale that will help you get to Act 2. On the SageMaker AI piece, I think there are 3 things I would love to highlight, the ones that we announced a few days ago. One is the task governance piece. One of the things that companies struggle with is how do you manage the training tasks? And can Amazon help govern and automate this task for the customers? So the Amazon SageMaker AI task governance, it helps customers achieve more from their compute resources than otherwise. Second is we also introduce flexible training plans. So now you can just specify your budget, you can specify your timeline, and you can specify how much compute resources you need. And we will create, Amazon SageMaker Hyperpod will create an automated training plan that suits your budget and your constraints, right? And we also introduce recipes. So customers who want to create very easy way for them to fine-tune and train a publicly available model, we make it super easy for them to be able to do that. And we also introduced partner apps as a part of the SageMaker Studio, where you can now easily use partner apps inside your SageMaker Hyperpod, and instead of having to go build your own managed instances of these services. So I'm super excited about some of these things. I could go on and on, but as you said, I have to stop at some of my favorite ones.
We're gonna make you choose before this ends up being an episode of Rogan, a 3-hour long podcast in here. But by the way, it sounds like we've got the material, so maybe we'll have to plan that later, Bhaskar. But let's get a little practical here.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Most of the consumption is not going to be. There's a handful of companies, including Amazon, they're going to do the training. They're going to build models, and for the rest of us, it's going to be, it's going to be techniques. It's going to be fine-tuning models. It's going to be RAG. It's going to be small language coupled with these larger models. Give us some good. Can you share maybe some examples of customers that are building on these services and kind of what are their outcomes? Is there any specific customers or even generic customers?
Yeah, fantastic question. I think as you saw in my talk, we have DoorDash. So DoorDash has actually built on top of Amazon's Bedrock and Knowledge Bases and Amazon Lex. So they have created a voice conversational AI agent that can actually respond with low latency when what they call as dashers have a question, right? And so they have used Amazon's knowledge bases to create the actual right response data source. They have used Amazon's Bedrock for the choice of LLMs. And then they have used Amazon Lex for voice conversational AI. So putting them all together, they have created an actual conversational agent that's actually used by the dashers in real time, hundreds of thousands of times a day. And I found it extremely impressive to see a real world application of these agents being built in production, right? And as you might have seen, we also had Phil Mui from Salesforce. And they demonstrated how their agent force, which is their autonomous agents piece, in fact, I think their Salesforce's data cloud and also the Einstein Studio, they now expose the Bedrock models for their own customers. In fact, Salesforce's research team uses SageMaker Hyperpod to develop the models and actually use the SageMaker's inference components for actually using their models for inference. So we have a lot of these very large-scale deployments of GenAI that's already happening. And it's super exciting for me to see that customers are truly moving from Act 1 to Act 2. And as I mentioned in my talk, Gartner predicts that only 30% of these prototypes actually move into production. So to see that these companies are actually in production at scale is extremely exciting.
Sage words. You get it? SageMaker? Sage words? You get that?
Very nice job.
Thank you.
So there's a lot here.
Yeah.
And personally, I have to say, very excited about the API that enables kind of all those structured and unstructured data sets to be utilized. I think unlocking the enterprise data is still more challenging. Like, we've been talking about this. There was a decade of big data before generative AI that we were talking about getting your data estate right, and that was still a problem as we ran into generative AI. I also really love what you're doing on the agentic side. Kind of interesting to see what you and Salesforce are kind of putting together, kind of combat some of the, because one of the things that sometimes people will say about AWS is not as app focused, but the way that you can actually become a great partner to some of the leaders in apps, I think this opens the door for you to be the partner of choice.
Absolutely.
And that's a great example of Salesforce. Let's end on something a bit more of a personal anecdote. So, obviously you're at the forefront of a very important transformation that's going on. You're driving development. You're making choices. We know that the leaders in this space right now are thinking about data utilization. They're thinking about ethics. They're thinking about security. They're thinking about, obviously, growth and economic productivity, efficiency. Kind of talk about your journey, your experiences that have kind of shaped how you're thinking about all this and how you're sort of driving your product forward.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that I would say, it's probably a personal anecdote, but I think it's actually useful to see how some of this inspired my belief in GenAI. There's a language called Sanskrit in India. It's a pretty old language. It's probably a few thousand years old. And one of the projects that I was doing around 4 or 5 years back was to be able to take documents that were actually in Sanskrit and translate them word by word into English. And that's basically when I realized the power of AI in general and even ML models, because I was able to take a very obscure document that was thousands of years old and being able to figure out a word by word translation of that. And I was looking at this and I was going, oh, wow, this is absolutely transformative. And so if you look at, and now if I look at, if you look back, I feel like we are now in an inflection point. This is very similar to how, when the mobile internet came out, the internet came across, or the mobile phones. This is an inflection point. And I do believe that what we are doing right now is going to be transformative in the era of technology, period.
Well, Bhaskar, I want to thank you so much for taking some time. It's good to learn a little bit about you personally, and of course, congratulations on so many announcements. By the way, always been a thing with AWS. I have to say, I've read your earnings reports for years. There's always been that part at the end of the report that talks about all the releases each quarter, and I'm always blown away about how much innovation, how much advancement. The only challenge maybe at times is just how does everyone keep up and make sure that they're always consuming. But of course, you've built a really significant workforce and team to work with all your customers on that. Let's have you back soon. Let's make sure that you're not a one-time on the 6.5. And congratulations and have a great rest of your week here.
Fantastic. Thank you both.
Thank
It's been
you.
awesome to chat with you all. And I'm super excited, as I said, and great. I would love to be back here.
Yeah, we'll do it again soon. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. The 6.5 is here. We are on the road at AWS reInvent 2024 here in Las Vegas. Hit subscribe. Join us for all of our content coverage here at the event. And of course, all the coverage on the 6.5. We appreciate you being part of our community. But for this episode, it's time to say goodbye. We'll see you all later.